In Eton, the jewel of the South Midlands, the town who gave us such great men as George Eliot and Larry Grayson, the throbbing heart of this teeming metropolis, the pearl of the CV13 postcode, down by the roundabout and up the one-way system, is Nuneaton Town Hall, where we can find none other than Nuneaton's Mr. Entertainment.
Hello ladies and gentlemen and boys and girls, I'm Barry Tadcaster and this is my friend Ken Jeffens, who is an orang Pendek. Hello, my name is Ken Jeffens and I am an orang Pendek. Unlike the other orang Pendeks, I do not come from the Indonesian island of Sumatra. I come from the London borough of Lewisham, where I am employed by Lewisham Town Council as an ombudsman. It's time for another episode of On the Track Xtra, and what we got for the viewers this week, Ken? This week we are visiting the Foundling Museum and meeting its proprietors, Meekly Humbleton and Lowly Humbleton.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be back and it's a really good feeling to be working on the second episode of On the Track Xtra for this year. I still once again want to apologise because we had hoped to have one coming out every week throughout what's euphemistically known as the festive season and January, which is euphemistically known as the hangover season. But as you know, Mother died, Karina was in hospital, I managed to injure both my feet. So things didn't work out the way we wanted them to. However, I am very glad to tell you that it does appear as if Karina is getting better slowly. We won't know for another couple of months, but she certainly seems to be doing better than she was before Christmas. And although my feet are still injured, they're no longer infected, and so I'm no longer in imminent danger of having them cut off. Yes, that was actually a thing for a while, and between you and me, I was terrified. But things are looking up, and we have a long and exciting year ahead of us. So, without any further ado, on with the show. One day in mid-January, Carl and I went exploring. As I can no longer drive, I don't get out and about anywhere like as much as I would want to, and I'm always dependent on someone else to take me. But it was one of the few dry days of the month, and I was getting stir-crazy, so Carl and I went out to see what we could find. Ever since I first learned to ride a bicycle back in the early spring of 1973, I've been exploring these lanes and have noted, with sadness, the slow and inexorable decline in their biodiversity. Once upon a time, each of the little ponds formed by the ditches along the edge of the roads was a self-contained mini biotope, each with its unique collection of tiny inhabitants. One of the things that most disappointed me when I came back here to live 15 years ago was that these beautiful little worlds had largely ceased to exist. Okay, the ponds were still there, some of them, but they were full of sludge, stagnant oily water, or in the best cases overgrown with vegetation. From memory, I used to visit something like 20 of these tiny worlds on a relatively regular basis, and today there's only one of them left. This, to me at least, makes this little stream down the side of the lane at Huddersfield immeasurably valuable. But we didn't go there first. Even though the ditches I explored with such fascination as a boy are no longer biodiversity hotspots, I have visited them regularly over the last 15 years to see how they have declined and in the vain hope that some of them may have gone backwards through time via some Star Trek wormhole and miraculously returned to the way that they once were. This is basically a depressing and thankless task, but it was a depressing and thankless January afternoon, and Carl had never visited most of these locations, and so it seemed a far nicer prospect than sitting in the office trying to write deathless prose about a rock and roll record that sounded exactly like the one before. So we drove, first up to Kenneland and then across to Huddersfield, and it was worse than I'd been expecting. Despite the bloody awful weather, which seems to have been with us for months, Sarah, the CFZ housekeeper, claims that it's rained every day since September, which seems to be the inverse opposite of what Carole King had promised.
It might as well rain until September.
Several of the ditches, which had been full of murky water and had at least played host to a diverse collection of plant life, such as the only place I could ever count on finding Aponegaton, apart from Mary Harry's garden centre, were now dry, and others were full of rusty mud, and the amount of rubbish everywhere was horrible. So we picked up the biggest and nastiest bits and went on our way. But I promised Carl I was saving the best for last. And when we drove up the winding lane to Huddersfield Plantation, the initial signs were rather good. A year or two after I came back here to live, the plantation had been felled and then replanted. But now we could see why this species of conifer is so beloved of people in the timber trade, because, although a year or two ago when I last visited the trees were still obviously young, like teenage boys they had undergone an enormous growth spurt, and whilst still nowhere near their eventual height, they had now reached mildly impressive proportions and were reminiscent of how they were when I used to go there when I was in my early 20s and still living at home and wanted to avoid the continual nagging and criticism of my parents. We parked in the little lay-by in which I had sat nearly 40 years ago in mid-December 1980, trying to make sense of the fact that my idol, John Lennon, had been assassinated, and I proudly pointed Carl in the direction of the little stream and the two deep ditches that fed it. Now, first the good news. All three waterways were full of crystal clear water. There were lots of different plants, including Aponegaton, which I'd mourned back at Kenneland, and which I had suspected now been extirpated from the area. And there were several large clumps of frog spawn, the first we'd seen all day, which was sad. The ditches at Kenneland had always been full of it in previous years, although it had always been killed off by frosts in February and early March. I have a theory about that, but more about that another time. But now the bad news. Carl found that one of the bits of the stream where the water from the ditches came into the running water was so full of rubbish, mostly cans and bottles, that the flow was almost clogged in some places. This had always been a place where I'd gone with girlfriends, but we'd always taken our rubbish home with us. I cannot tell you how shocked and horrified I felt. How bad is it?
It's really, really bad. I think that really it's our responsibility to come back and try and sort it out.
I think we shall do so.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally washed. Obviously it's been thrown in from the road, and it's that much of it. It's actually gone right up here, and it's blocking the flow of the water.
And this is one of the few healthy bits of water we've found.
This is a potential ecological disaster.
In the Netherlands lives a young English girl called Lilly Platt. Some years ago, being horrified by the mess that our species is making of the environment, she vowed to do something about it. And so she started something called Lilly's Plastic Pickup, and that got me thinking. If Lilly and her friends can do that in Holland, and an Irish girl called Flossie, who, like Lilly, I follow on Twitter, can run something called Flossie and the Beach Cleaners, then perhaps we could do something like that here. I recently became editor of the local village news, which is called The Village News, doing exactly what it says on the tin, and I did so because I want to make a difference. I didn't just want to print stories about the local WI and the times and dates of church services, important as they are, and I think I may have just found something I can do, and that we can do if we're on the track to make a difference. What do you think?
And now over to Jon and Leanne for our second look at the Boleskine House fire.
When I was in my teens, and that will stay with me forever, what went on up there. So whatever he did up there, something remains. There's just something that isn't, I don't know, it's something not right.
Do you want to talk about it? Are you okay to talk about it?
Yeah, I can if you want, yeah. Well, what it was, it was me and my boyfriend at the time, and a friend of ours. We were in Inverness and we didn't really have anything. It was a weekend, and I can't remember which one of us suggested it, but one of us suggested, why don't we go and camp at Boleskine House in the graveyard? So, of course, we got a lift from my boyfriend's dad. He took us. We didn't have a tent or anything. We just decided, because it was a summer's night, and it was really warm. We thought, we'll just stay. We'll stay up all night. And we got there and everything sort of was fine, and then things suddenly took a bit of a turn. There was the only way I can describe it is like disembodied voices and whispering. And then it was the weirdest thing. This stag appeared out of nowhere and an owl, and I was thinking, what the hell's all this? And it all culminated in that we were looking. Have you been to Boleskine House? Have you been to the graveyard?
No, I've seen it from a boat.
Well, if you're standing on the graveyard, it's on a slope, and there's a wall, and then it goes down to the Loch. Well, we were standing there, and we were just talking, because I think what it was, we were saying, do you think we should get down there to get to the Loch to get water? Because my friend was, he was in the cadets, and he had his army food, and he wanted water to make stuff. I don't know what he was doing. So we're discussing this, and then all of a sudden, from nowhere, this huge, I don't know, thing came running from the right side, and this must have been about 8-9 foot, and it was bulky. It just came running, and it just bolted and disappeared on the left side. And we were all looking at each other, and we thought, what the fuck did we just see? And I was panicking, and everyone was saying, what, was it somebody? And we just didn't know what was going on. And we went into the hut there. There's a hut where Jimmy Page signed it. It's all closed off now. You can't get in anymore. But we went in there, and we heard whispering coming from the down bit, and we just bolted it out, and it just all came to a head with that thing running. We didn't know what the hell that was. And then there was more voices, and we thought, you know what? We're obviously not welcome here. We're leaving. And we walked from, now this is the other weird thing, we talked about time lapses. We walked from fires, from where Boleskine House is, to doors. Now that would have taken hours, but it must have been maybe an hour, and none of us could explain that. We looked in our bags, one of my friend's bags, all his stuff was gone, it was full of dirt. And we sat there, and I phoned my mum, and I said, Mum, you've got to come and get us. And she drove, and she came and got us. And she was screaming at me all the way, saying, what the hell are you going to bring into our house? Because afterwards, things went haywire in my house. Just things moving and shuffling and footsteps. And my mum was quite annoyed, but yeah, I'll never forget that. So it was extraordinary. I mean, I know it probably sounds mad, but it really did happen.
No, I'm sure it did. I mean, I've had stuff like this happen to me, and I wasn't ever brave enough to go and try and spend a night in a graveyard next to Crowley's old house.
Well, we got the impression we weren't welcome.
Dare I say, Leanne, my dear, that was a bloody stupid thing to do.
Yeah, probably.
You're a braver girl than I am.
At least it was an experience, but not so long ago, before the second fire, my husband and I went and camped there. I don't know if Mike told you, we went and camped there the night, and I took Crowley's book, the Book of Thoth with me, and I was like reading from it, and I had on, and nothing really happened. The only sort of, there was voices, but I actually felt quite safe, which is really weird.
Maybe the angel. What was it, Abramelin?
Oh yeah, the ritual that he performed, yeah.
Because he was a guardian angel, wasn't he?
Yes, that's aye. So it's just. No, I thought, because my husband, he said, and he said, I don't want to go and camp there. I said, no, we'll go and camp. So we did. We just walked up and just set our tent just beside the house and stayed there.
I'm with your husband on this one, but I'm a card-carrying coward, so...
He was on the second one. He doesn't really... He got a really bad feeling. He was quite nervous.
And we'll be back with Leanne for the third, final, and quite possibly the scariest part of this fascinating interview very soon. But now...
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, between the year 2000 and 2017, that's 17 years, I promoted something that we called the Weird Weekend, which was a conference for and by the Centre for Fortean Zoology. The Weird Weekend came to an end for all sorts of reasons, but I missed the Weird Weekend massively, and so I decided to rebrand on the track and make it more like the Weird Weekend, give it more of the zeitgeist of high strangeness and sheer silliness, as well as the hard science, which was always the hallmark of the Weird Weekend. And so, instead of coming out with an episode of nearly an hour once a month, we do our regular monthly episodes of On the Track, but they're kept down to about half an hour ago now, and in between, we aim to do them every week, but it doesn't always work out like that, we have something called On the Track Xtra. And I hope you enjoy it, and just to give you another taste of what the new On the Track's like, here, taken pretty well at random, but two links that I think you might enjoy.